Thanks for joining us, everybody. We have grant writing tips and tricks with Lisette, Walser, and Brittany Taylor, both from Four Roots. Lisette, well, both of them are co-CEOs of Four Roots. Lisette is a certified pre-award research administrator and professional grant writer with 13 years experience researching, writing, and administering competitive grants and contracts. Over this time, she has helped raise over $80 million in funding for universities, nonprofits, public entities, and small businesses. Prior to Four Roots, Lisette was executive director for the In the Northwest Farmers Market Association, CEO of Upwords, a private firm, and grant and contract coordinator for WSU. Lisette is dedicated to helping organizations raise funds and awareness for their causes while specializing in the areas of food system resilience, sustainable agriculture, youth programs, and land conservation. Thanks for being here, Lisette. And then we have Brittany Tyler, also co-CEO of Four Roots. Brittany is a U.S. Navy veteran with over 10 years experience in food and hospitality industry. Throughout that time, she's worked in food production, restaurant management, multi-venue management, and event and fundraising campaign production and management. Prior to the inception of Four Roots, Brittany worked for the In the Northwest Farmers Market Association as a farmer, sales liaison, and development director, a pastry chef at Chap's Restaurant in Spokane, and a food and beverage manager with Horseshoe Casino and its multiple restaurants and event venues. Brittany is diligent and passionate about building the resilience of local and regional food, agriculture, and small business systems and organizations. Thanks for being here, you guys.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, everyone. It's such an honor to be here. And yes, my name is Lisette Walser, and I'm one of the two co-CEOs of Four Roots. And I'm Brittany Tyler, also here from Four Roots in Spokane. Yes. We are honored to talk to you today about grant writing and some tips and tricks that we have learned over the years and are welcome to share with you. Wonderful. So for today's agenda, I know we just came from, or most people probably just came from lunch, so we want to keep this fun and interactive as best we can. I know grant writing can be a very dry, boring topic. We want to keep it as lively as possible. So if you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, we will have designated stopping points at the end there, specifically for questions and answers too. So we'll start off with some terms and definitions around grants, just so we're all on the same page and speaking the same language. Next, developing your strategy, where to find funding, some tips there, as well as application components, tips and tricks from the industry, award management, and then the Q&A. Before we get started, do we have any brave volunteers who would like to provide your take or definition on what is a grant? The term that gets thrown around a lot, but what does it mean?
I'll take a shot. I would say it funds award for a particular purpose, and you can prove then that you're making sure you're using those funds for the program intended.
Wonderful, wonderful answer. Absolutely. And you might forwarding. There's actually so many different definitions, and even within the legal system and different agencies at the state and federal level of what the definition of a grant is. So from grants.gov, a grant is a way the government funds your ideas and projects to provide public services and stimulate the economy. Grants support critical recovery initiatives, innovative research, and many other programs listed in the catalog of federal domestic assistance. So some other takes on the definition of a grant. So from dictionary.com is a sum of money given by a government or other organization for a particular purpose without expectation of payment. As far as my definition or take on it goes, is it a transfer of money from one party, such as the funder, to another, the recipient organization, without expectation of payment and having a clear scope of work, budget, and timeline. A grant usually requires some sort of report upon completion, even if that's a follow-up email or card or pictures, there's usually some sort of response requested of the recipient. But it is ultimately an instrument for realized opportunity as it comes to your organization and your programs within. So there's lots of different award vehicles that we could go into for another session, but there's some other avenues could be sponsorships, contracts, vendor agreements, procurement orders, cooperative agreements, and that each one, as well as a gift, each one has its own lingo and its own legal and financial terminology associated with that. So now going into some of the acronyms and the terminology, and everyone on the same page here. Lots of acronyms all around. Yeah. So first is the request for proposals. A lot of you are probably already well familiar with this, or also known as RFP. These are grant solicitations that start with the funding agency or foundation who is publishing a set of guidelines and instructions for applying. It should include the deadline, eligibility criteria, and purpose. They can go by some different names, such as request for applications or RFA, notice of funding opportunity, notice of application, funding opportunity announcement. It's ultimately the application instructions or your guidelines that you're going to want to follow and read and reread over again to make sure you're following everything listed therein. The application, so that's a specific set of forms, documents, and attachments that comprise an applicant's submission to a grant opportunity. Award is financial assistance that provides support to accomplish a public purpose. You have AOR, that stands for Authorized Organizational Representative. That's the individual or individuals designated to sign and enter into agreements on behalf of your organization. Terms and conditions, those are the legally binding requirements as set forth in the award letter, agreed to in writing by the funder and recipient's AOR. So next, going into the grant life cycle. So grants go through a process, and that process tends to follow a linear approach from creating the funding opportunity to applying to making award decisions to successfully implementing, reporting, and closing out the award. And here's a visual from grants.gov for the grant life cycle there. So the three key phases along that life cycle are, so the pre-award phase, so that's when the funding opportunity and that request for proposals comes out. Applications and eligibility criteria are set. Next is the award phase. That's when award decisions and notifications are made and the terms and conditions should also be communicated. Then finally post-award. So that's your implementation, reporting, and closeout phase. So even though we're primarily talking today about the pre-award phase, we'll also be touching upon the post-award phase. What's good for any grant writer, whoever is assuming that role within your organization, to have a good full spectrum knowledge of the cradle to grave evolution that a grant goes through. So within the pre-award phase, that's when your initial concept is created. You're developing a strategy within your program, department, and organization. You're getting grant ready, and we'll go through more of that here shortly and what that can include. Finding the right funding opportunities, crafting a competitive application, and then finally submitting the application. So we listed this in this order specifically because we really want to encourage everyone to not chase funding opportunity. Make sure that you have your programmatic objectives set, your goals, your mission statement, and then find the funding opportunity that aligns with that. We see lots of organizations maybe get into trouble or steer away from their mission if it's the financial first versus the mission and the call. So developing a concept. So you really want to address and acknowledge the who, what, when, where, why, how. And I like to use this to build a one-page project proposal, or if that's an operational proposal, but really drilling it down to just those key components will help your grant writing team be able to build around that. At least you have a skeleton to work with. Then your one-page grant proposal. So this essentially covers all of the components. And again, not chasing the funding, but developing your concept and then chasing the dream. So first is the title, so descriptive title and acronym. Applicant organization, so the name of the lead organization. Most applications are going to require one organization to be the lead. Proposal idea, so 3 to 5 sentences, some sort of elevator pitch or just high-level overview statement, something that usually the grant funder would like to be able to take forward in publications and news releases around the program. Objectives, so I mean SMART goals and objectives. So those are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Impact, what will result? How will your project make a difference? Next, your target audience, who will you benefit? Geographic and demographic details, quantities, how many people and when? Project duration, what are your proposed start and end dates? Your partners and what are their roles, including subcontractors and consultants. And then also considering the budget, how much is this going to mean? So if you're able to develop enough of this concept for this one-page proposal that covers these components, it's going to be much more accessible for if you're using a librarian or if you're looking at using a staff member consultant to find the funding opportunities that will align with this. And please know a lot of times it's going to take more than one grant award to be able to build out a program, round out a program. So you might need one that's helping with the startup phase, another it's helping the capital improvements and equipment. So being able to have that long view while you're also working on the short-term goals. Next is developing a strategy and looking at the organizational level as well. So a plan of action detailing how you are going to accomplish your concept within a specific time, window, and budget. So first of all, defining your grant writing team, both within and outside your organization, and also looking to partner organizations to help contribute to that grant writing effort. Setting priorities, timeline, and budget, finding relevant funding opportunities, creating tools for grant writing success, and seeking board approval for those of you who need to seek board approval. So that's really your strategic development component. Next is finding the right funding opportunities. So there are many, many different search engines and systems, including those that are subscription-based that one can utilize, but some of the very helpful ones can be, so grants.gov, particularly for your federal grant opportunities. You can search by category, organization type, and agencies. So if you only want to look for USDA opportunities, you can fine tune it there. Another is Foundation Directory Online. This is one of the best kept secrets in the industry, is that almost all of you probably have access to this tool, which is normally very, very expensive in the industry, for free at your local library. Most libraries in Washington State have free subscriptions to Foundation Directory Online, and many librarian specialists also have knowledge and experience in how to use this tool to help you find funding opportunities. So remember that wonderful, valuable tool that's in your back pocket. And within FDO, you can search by geographic area, focus area, topic, and organization type. Another really special component of this tool is that you can search for funding opportunities by seeing who within your community, maybe a similar organization, was awarded, who are those foundations, what's their contact information, because that way you can really fine tune if there's a particular foundation or family trust in your community that you may not know about, maybe that's what line location wise. So finding grants at the state, county, and city level. So WEBS is a system, so Washington's Electronic Business Solution System. That one's particularly usually geared more towards technical assistance and contracts and services. However, that's one it would be one to keep an eye on and subscribe to, as well as agency and municipality websites. Each one like that usually has their own form of communication, a listserv or some sort of newsletter, but just reaching out to their program officer or their front desk is asking if you can be added to a list for future announcements. It's amazing how many times it comes down to just having that line of communication already established and being ready to apply when it does come out. Next are so community foundations. So most communities have a designated community foundation. There's a website here where you can look up the community foundation in your area, but these are grant-making public charities that are dedicated to improving the lives of people in a defined local geographic area. They offer grant opportunities, donor advice funds, and endowment funds. and they can help you find funding opportunities. So that's a wonderful resource as well. There's was added here to show that everyone needs operational support. Unfortunately, those are the grants that are the hardest to come by, right? It's usually program specific. So looking outside the box for funding that may not be solely reliant on grants and recovery operations. So tracking opportunities, the importance of keeping your grant deadlines organized in some sort of calendar and making updates as needed. So you want to include your upcoming opportunities that you have identified or someone has identified for you 18 months if you can. And a lot of times a grant opportunity may have a very similar deadline every year, even if it's not open year round. You can at least get a feel for what could be forecasted based upon what has happened retroactively in the past. Like, hey, this agency has awarded a grant just about every July. The RFP usually comes out every May. Even though it's not posted on their website right now, I can be ahead of that and have that on our calendar for our organization to be ready for once it comes out. And sharing that with your grant writing team of having as a living, breathing, organic spreadsheet that's getting updated and reviewed frequently, including some key details such as funder, the agency, deadline, award amount, priorities, the purpose of the award, link to the application, and then also any highlights if there's any mention requirements or specific letter of interest with partner requests there. So that way that can be nice to take to your development team or to a board of directors too for updates that you can reference that frequently. Next is keeping tabs on your application. So everything that's been submitted, this will be largely helpful, especially for your accountant and for your auditor if it comes time for an audit. So keeping a grant results log, just like you're keeping a calendar with all applications submitted to date, and also sharing that with the team and making updates frequently, including those same key details as well as login information. A lot of grants are submitted over online portals. And making sure you have that information ready. Would it surprise you how many times an organization may not have this login information? They found out they got an award, but they have no idea what they can do with it, how to log in, how to submit a report. So that information is really, really important to keep tabs on, as well as the reporting requirements. So what I like to do is have a grant calendar in one spreadsheet. I have separate tabs, have the basic info of the organization is tab 1. Tab 2 is the grant deadline calendar. Tab 3 is the results. So everything's all there in one place for your key staff members have access to. Okay, so next, so getting grant ready. So you want to get your digital infrastructure in place. So those tools we talked about, grant deadline calendar and grant results log. And if you would like copies of any of the templates too, please feel free. Our business cards are on the side here too. We'd be happy to share them. Next is having your organizational information cheat sheet, having an Excel or Google sheet. So that has the name of the organization, your real key details like tax ID number, what's your UEI, what's your Washington State UBI, the address, who's the contact person, all these key details already listed out. So it's gonna be so much easier because almost every single grant application asks for the same information that you or whoever is spearheading the grant writing efforts can copy and paste that. And then if you need to make an update, you can make the update in one place. And then all information coming forward after that is updated as well. Also including your fiscal year start and end date, because that's a frequently asked question, your previous year's total revenue and expenses, and then your bank account information. So getting grant ready. So building your frequently requested documents library. Similarly, as a lot of the same questions are repeated from grant application to grant applications, so are the required attachment documents. Having these pieces in place is going to make you more competitive and more ready to act on these different opportunities as they arise. First is the About Us document. So with your organization's mission, vision, purpose, and values. Your background, what are your services, what are your successes, impact, data, statistics. Your IRS determination letter showing what kind of business you are, as well as with the address and name of the contact person. State business license, your financial statements, year to date, and if you have the previous years, that's very important too. Your board of directors list with names, roles, and affiliations that will help the grant funder rule out any conflict of interest. Budget, as well as a recent audit or your previous year's financial review, as well as any findings. Key personnel, so including resumes, CVs, and job descriptions, including for any prospective hires that you're going to use with grant funds. Collateral, so flyers, brochures, photos, annual reports, stories, and interviews. So more steps to getting grant ready. So first is, if you're not already, getting registered with sam.gov. That's a requirement for most public funding, is that you have that registration and that it stays active. That usually requires an annual renewal, and it is free. So if any solicitor tells you differently, don't listen to them. It's free, shouldn't cost a dime. And also through sam.gov, you're going to want a UEI number. So that stands for Unique Entity ID. That was previously known as a DUNS number. So if your organization had a DUNS number, it should have been converted over to UEI. However, that hasn't happened with everyone, and that could be kind of a time-consuming process sometimes. So if you find that you do not have a UEI, get your application in as soon as you can. And a helpful tip is to call up the sam.gov help desk, because if you just wait on them, that can be 8 to 12 months versus it's kind of a squeaky wheel against the grid situation. You call them up, let them do, get it resolved much faster. And also ensuring your documentation, specifically your IRS determination letter, has the correct name of your organization and the address, because that will very much expedite the process of getting a UEI number. So organizational readiness, so some pieces you'll want to have in place.
Did I go too fast?
Thank you. So financial systems, sure you all have some sort of accounting software, bookkeeping software, budgets, making sure that all costs are reasonable, allocable, allowable, and consistently treated. So if you're charging one grant $5,000 for one particular piece of equipment, you're going to charge $5,000 towards funder piece of equipment. Having sufficient staffing or consulting or a plan to be able to hire enough staffing and consulting to carry on the work. Also, compliance and awareness of your 2 CFR 200 compliance, and if not, reaching out to a nonprofit CPA who is familiar. And also financial resources. A lot of grants, especially your public grants, are reimbursement based. So making sure that your organization and program can float the boat for that first 30, 60, 90 days, however long that's going to be until reimbursement comes in. And if not, we're kind of getting a line of credit.
What's that 2 CFR 200? What's that in reference
So
to?
that
Just
is
kind of-
audit requirements as it pertains to grant funds or sponsorship dollars. So if your organization receives $750,000 or more in one fiscal year from all federal resources, so grants, contracts, et cetera, that then will trigger and require a single audit. So that will be important to keep track of, and allows also set some guidelines of how funds can be used and how much indirect costs you can charge. Great question, thank you. Okay, so application checklist. So after you've identified grant opportunity or multiple opportunities, creating your to-do task list with your team based upon the request for proposal. So making sure you're following along with those required components as listed in the grant guidelines to a T, but coming up with a game plan internally, even if that's just for you, if you're the only writer, that could be very helpful. This is just a screen grab of a recent grant application that our team worked on, listing out what the key items were, who's the team player that's responsible for it, and what's the internal due date for that. So preparing your application, so some common elements of a grant application. So first is the project abstract. Next is the project narrative, a budget and budget justification, business documents, letters of support or commitment, then your attachments such as resumes, flyers, brochures, pictures, and stories. But again, checking that request for proposals, because every RFP, every program is a little different, making sure you have all the key elements. So first, so the project abstract. So that's a 1 to 2 page overview of the proposed project. So from that one-page proposal we were talking about earlier, a lot of those components are very similarly requested within the abstract. So that could be in a copy and paste scenario if you already have that information identified. So descriptive title, name of lead applicant, statement of need, activities, and how they align to the funder's priorities. That's actually something that I'd like to call out in the first 1 to 2 paragraphs of your project narrative, and where you can as soon as possible in the abstract, specifically showing how your program, your request aligns with the grant funder's priorities and their mission statement, because they have a review committee or board of directors to report to. Key goals and objectives, project duration, partners, and then your project summary. And project narrative. So this will be in response to that request for proposal. Some agencies provide a rubric you can work with, but if not, some common items that are usually requested on that include organization information, purpose and objectives of your research or project, alignment with the funding agency's priorities, significance or greater contribution and impact, your methods and methodology, how will success be measured, timeline, work plan, projected outcomes, your dissemination plan, and how the project will be sustained beyond this award. So those final two items, the dissemination plan, so how will you distribute the results and outcomes, including metrics of success, to the broader community, including your own scientific community, your geographic community, the broader, especially if you're with a state or federal agency, how you could create a report, have some sort of online form to share that information. I'm noticing that because it's much more common theme in a lot of state and federal opportunities, as well as that sustainability plan that, okay, great, even if you secure this grant, what is that going to mean for the grand scheme of things? So you aren't going back to the same well multiple times, continuing asking for support. Perfect. Now the budget. So that's telling your story with numbers. The most, I think, underappreciated and underutilized tool that can be used to grant writers' benefit are the budget and budget narrative. So really making sure once you have those programmatic details locked in, it makes it much easier to work on the budget after that. So personnel, so considering salaries and wages, an hourly rate or FTE, as well as applying a cost of living increase for consecutive years when allowed. We all know inflation has been through the roof, so I think allowing for at least a 4 to 5% increase or what's allowed in your guidelines. Fringe benefits, equipment. So equipment is typically considered an item that has a value of $5,000 or greater per individual item. Travel, so domestic and foreign travel are listed separately, and using the General Services Administration per diem and travel rates by city can be a great way to help calculate an estimate there. Materials and supplies. Other costs that can include publication costs, marketing, etc. Subawards, consultant fees, and then indirect costs. Those are sometimes known as administrative costs, or overhead, or F&E. So the budget narrative. So that is putting your descriptions to the numbers that you referenced in your budget. So not only should your narrative describe and explain the details of the budget spreadsheet, it should enhance and strengthen your request and making sure that you're following line item by line item what you proposed and how much you propose in accordance with each line item expenditure. And it doesn't need to be super detailed, but giving some sort of explanation for how you arose to that cost, why it's necessary to this specific proposal, and what the basis was for the calculation. And some general tips and tricks. So determining what the funder is looking for to fund and why. So speak to how your project aligns with these priorities of the funder's mission within the first 1 to 2 paragraphs of your narrative. So you're making it easier for the reviewer to be able to pull that out and help give you a more favorable score. Ensuring eligibility and sticking to the RFP guidelines. It's so heartbreaking when you find out an organization didn't get an award because it came down to a technicality on eligibility. So not overlooking that. And if you need to clarify that, clarify on the forefront with a program officer compared to down the road. And then following that RFP guideline to a T and making sure that you're following the page margin restrictions, font size, all the detail that seems so nitty gritty, but I've seen applications get thrown out because it's a 1/2 inch margin document versus 1 inch margins. Starting early, most federal applications take at least 3 to 4 months to write. Rallying support from your team, including the community and partner external organizations. Researching the funding entity, their cited resources, and their giving history. Setting realistic goals and ideas for your application. And a good budget narrative goes a long way. Using your organizational tools such as spell check, Google Docs, Google Sheets. Diversifying your funders. Don't go back to the same well too many times, right? considering the application from the reviewer's perspective, and even become a reviewer. That's probably the best thing you can do to strengthen your grant writing skills is to sign up to become a reviewer for a program and be able to screen the proposals, because you'll glean a lot of knowledge and awareness around what to look for and what to incorporate into your writing techniques. Listening and following your gut instinct. Knowing when to pass on an opportunity is just as important than knowing when to go for an opportunity. Write like you're telling the story to your grandma. My key mentor taught me this, and it's so true, because most reviewers are laypersons unless it's a very technical focused proposal. So keeping that in mind, to not use too much industry jargon as you're writing. And don't give up. Every application brings some sort of benefit to your cause. It may have helped you really fine tune your programmatic focus, your mission statement, being able to work with your board of directors and gather financials. Those are all wins in the grand scheme of things. So look into the long-term plan there. Using pictures, photos, videos, tables and charts to tell your story. It's really true that a picture says 1,000 words, and using that to your advantage in your proposal, including charts and diagrams. And whenever you can, having video clips or even short interviews with your customer base or those who are benefiting from your program, that really touches the heartstrings and resonates with them. Great, so now we're going to turn over and cover some post-award. Does anybody need to stand up and stretch? Thanks for not just me. Cool. Okay. One sec. Okay. So you've gotten a grant, you've gotten awarded, and now what? You got to do something with that money, right? So post-award management. Go ahead. Anyway. Okay. There's a whole purpose to the management of your award. Your purposes are to mitigate the risks to the award, enhance your operational efficiencies, and then uphold the integrity of the award. When we talk about risk mitigation, it is so important to implement that risk management system, that strategic plan upon the award of any of your grants or contracts, and to then revisit that system as regularly as you possibly can. This is a living and breathing system. You need to be making sure along the way you're consistent in making your adjustments and refinements. Your risks can be identified at your program level, your entity level, and the award level. So at the program level, and this is not an exhaustive list by any means, of course, these are again specific to any program or any entity. But your total number and dollar amount of all your open awards for that program. One program may be holding more than one grant or contract. Like we said, you may need something for your equipment and something for your staffing costs and programmatic. So ensuring that you have a handle on all of those open awards for that program. If this is a new area of focus for this program, what are the total number of sub awards that program is monitoring? And again, for the entity level, those same things, but more specific to the organization as a whole. How many open awards are there? What is the total dollar amount that is open for the entity at any given point in time? Are these new programs? Are they new areas of focus for the organization? Total number of sub awards again. And then also the recent audit results of any of your sub-awardees, subcontractors, anybody that you're working with. What have been their financial findings after their reviews? At the award level, your planned expenditures versus your actual expenditures. Are you falling in line with the budget that you proposed? And then progress against your award deliverables. This can come in the form of your interim reporting or any of your reportings, your requests that are due back to your program monitor. Have you made progress against those deliverables that you said that you would in your proposal? And then have you had a need for modification requests? It's not necessarily a bad thing to need to modify, but how frequently are you needing to make modifications to the plan that you had proposed? Once you've identified these risks, then you need to create your plan and implement this so that you can mitigate. So the 4 strategies of risk mitigation in any project can be easily adapted here. And these are avoidance, reduction, transference, and acceptance. Of course, we all want to avoid risk. The idea of avoiding a risk is that it's no longer a risk. You've removed the probability that it will even occur, and that sounds so nice. And it's really unlikely. So good luck with that one. Of course, we want to do this, but really we actually aim to reduce the probability of that occurrence to what we call a manageable level. So reduction is this continuous process, again, constant monitoring and refining of proactively minimizing your effects of any given risk. So this might mean education for your staffing, for your managers, for yourself. It might mean intervention. If something has happened, are you nipping it in the bud? Are you taking care of it immediately? And there are other strategies, of course. Transference. This means that you let somebody else take the risk for you. This is where you outsource. You say somebody else is specifically qualified to take this risk on. This might be your insurance policies, your subcontractors, your vendors or service providers. This is something that if you do not have the capacity to staff or employ a position for this particular risk, outsource it. Get somebody else to take that risk on for you. This could be your accounting, bookkeeping, your human resources, your payroll, all of those things that you may not be able to do internally. And then, of course, acceptance. There is no such thing as no risk. It just doesn't exist. Sorry, it's not there. So at some point we have to say, okay, we're going to take this risk. And this is the things that you have minimized or transferred to the greatest extent possible. But there is, of course, still going to be that outlying probability that it may occur and it may have an adverse effect upon your program or your entity. So these are things that are vital. We're not going to accept just any risk, right? Right. Okay. These are things that are vital to your organization, to your entity, to your program. Legal obligations. Those are a big one. Uncertain financial markets. I think if anything we've learned over the last 5 years is a reality, right? That is a risk that we have to deal with. And then natural disasters or aggressive competition. Somebody out there might be doing the job better than you are. It's a reality, right? So this is a risk that we have to take. And these should be regularly monitored. And if you come across an opportunity to mitigate the risk, then you should proactively do so. Moving on to enhancement of our operational efficiency. So alongside mitigating your risks, this is where it's vital to the success of your grant or contract management to streamline your processes. Ensure that you have a process in place for award management, create the structure of your efficiency ahead of time, and then lower the risks to your award, to your program, and to your entity. Your organizational system, this is the structure of your company, right? This is the structure of your organization. It's the flow of communication. It's your reporting hierarchies, your division of roles and responsibilities. We like to say that Lisette finds the money and I spend it. So having those roles clearly defined ahead of time. Then defining those aspects, then you're more able to effectively and efficiently operate your program or your entity. So communicating the structure might include creating an organizational chart. You guys have all seen, like, here's the top and here's your managers and here's your staff members. Creating a programmatic structure chart, identifying the roles and responsibilities of each person on that chart. Building your manual of standard operating procedures. For the love of all that is holy, do this ahead of time. Holding staff training regularly to ensure that the folks who are managing and staffing your program understand their responsibilities. And then, of course, regular monitoring of that process. So with your award management process, there are 3 phases to this. You have your implementation, your reporting, and your closeout. Yep. When it comes to implementation, you're going to obtain your authorization to expend your funds. You need to seek authorization of all your expenditures, except of course your salary of your principal investigator, your program director. And then prepare and submit your payment and personnel requirements. This might include time and effort reports. This might include some of the other documentation, usually specified in your RFP, but if not specified in your award documentation. Monitor your spending. Do not get out of line with your budget.
Don't try to backtrack. It's not a fun time to do that. Staff your program appropriately. So often we see, especially in some of our nonprofit organizations or our organizations that are heavily mission oriented and mission driven. It's like a concept of martyrdom, right? We have this passion for our project. And that means that we're gonna wear all the hats and we're gonna do all the things, and we can work 120 hours a week, every week. No, you can't. You just can't. Find that sustainability in your program by appropriately staffing your program. And then ensure your accounting policies are in place and that they are appropriately executed. Be ready for an audit, whether you are going to be eligible for an audit or not. Execute your programming and then identify and implement or adapt your logistics as needed for that program. With reporting, this really is going to be down to the award contract language, grant language. They will have a period for your reporting, whether it's going to be quarterly, monthly, annually. If you have to do an interim report and a closeout report, whatever that is, ensure that you know what your reporting requirements are ahead of time. Know when they need to go in, know how they need to go in. What is the method of submittal? Is this going to be an email? Is this going to be across an online portal? Are you sending a carrier pigeon? What is your method of submitting your reports? And then get those reports in on time. Really important to make sure that when somebody has given you money and asked you to do something, that you do what they've asked you to. And then the closeout of your award. This is where you're just finalizing and finishing everything up, ensuring that all the award activities are completed. Documentation of the award activities are completed. This may not always, the documentation and reporting of your grant or contract may not be the final day of activity. You may have 2 weeks beyond final day of operations. You may have a month beyond final day of operations, but ensuring that all of that is completed according to the date in your contract language or grant language. Submit those final reports in accordance, of course, with your award requirements. Seek any supplemental funding or a no-cost extension if it's necessary. This is not uncommon. It is not uncommon to get to the end, especially over the last couple of years, but to get to the end of your grant period and need a little bit of extra time. Now, again, if this is something you're consistently coming across, that will begin to show up as not so great, right? But if you need to do that, seek that no-cost extension and prepare your documentation for audit. Like Lisette had mentioned earlier, if you have received $750,000 or more across all of your federal funding, you will trigger that single audit, and it is a rigorous process. Okay, upholding the integrity of your award. This is so important. If you're going for a grant, and again, we're saying don't chase the funding, right? Chase the dream, chase the mission. When you receive that grant, your whole goal should be that you are in this for the right reasons. This is so important across the entire life cycle of the grant. These practices are going to ensure your program and organization are doing your due diligence, operating within the spirit of the award. Be transparent. Communicate openly and honestly with the awarding entity's grant or contract manager, and be open to suggestions and willing to adapt or pivot. We have found so many times it is such an intimidating thing to reach out to somebody who has given you money from a government entity, but I promise you they put their pants on one leg at a time. They are all human beings, and it is so important to just be transparent and open and communicate. Share a report on any previous award experiences if it's requested. If they want to know, hey, what happened with this over here? Let them know. Report on it. Be transparent with that. Create equitable experiences surrounding the recruitment and hire of staffing contractors, subcontractors. Any of those processes must create equity in those recruitments. And then be proactive. Anticipate and mitigate your potential risks. Keep your messaging consistent from day one to the last day. Your messaging should be consistent. Maintain strict security protocols. Don't invite risk or hazard. And of course, first and foremost, and always operate with integrity and honesty. So beyond your awards, we are of course discussing the application management processes pertaining to grants and contracts. However, it is so important for any organization, any entity to supplement those funding sources with sustainable financial plans over time. So depending on the structure of your organization, there are different means and methods of building out your portfolio, building out your programmatic endeavors. And so seeking the assistance of a CPA, especially if you are a nonprofit qualified CPA is so important. But helping to identify your opportunities. So capital campaigns, specific project focused fundraising, fundraising events, matching funds, donations or sponsorships, fiscal sponsorships, endowments, land trust, sales, investments, real estate. There are so many opportunities out there to really strategize and build out that sustainability for your organization so that you are not reliant entirely upon the volatile world of grants and contracts, of the application for government funding. Building those sources out is incredibly vital to your longevity as an organization. And again, we'd like to just impress upon you that it is so important when you go for any grant, any contract, any of these things, that it is not about finding the money. It is about finding the dream. It is about building out these things, being aware of the process, understanding your realistic capacity and capability to execute what you apply for. If you sign on the dotted line to receive all of that money and you are not able to deliver upon what you have applied for, I promise you it's going to be much harder the next time to receive those funds. Ensure you know what you're getting into when you put that application forward and be ready. Lisette, I'd like to invite Lisette back up. Are there any questions? Yes.
So something I've come across is when you have a potential project, and you have to work with funders, do you have any guidelines on how to decide which one to apply for? If you can't, put the same project in multiple.
Sure.
So like how, do you have any guidance on how to kind of narrow down or find the best fit for the project, so you know what to apply to?
Yeah, that's a great question, because like there are limited resources, right? And staffing and bandwidth to be able to apply for as many as you can. I would say, as far as the first step goes, preparing that one-page grant proposal, that concept paper, if you will, sharing that with the program officers or grant managers for the different programs, asking if you could have a meeting with them, that they can review that and then feedback. Sometimes they can, sometimes they can't, but a lot of times they can. That is their job, is to help find the appropriate opportunity organization to invest in through those funds. So I would maybe start there and see what sort of feedback you get, and if that can help fine tune which direction. Great question.
Well, thank you, everybody. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.